If you're interested in hearing my 10 steps to prep before you start sewing, then please stick around. Yes, I know 10 steps seems like a lot, but sewing is actually 80% preparation, 10% ironing, and only 10% sewing. Believe it or not. So let's talk a little bit about productivity. I do get a lot of stuff done with my two helpers over here. It goes without saying that an organized sewing space is of the utmost importance. And at times, this is something that I really struggle with. I am grateful for the 2-bedroom hobbit house that we live in, but it is tight on storage space. Our second bedroom, you know, something like a spare bedroom, where people who don't hoard craft supplies would invite people over to stay the night, is my craft room. The way the house was designed, the craft room was actually supposed to be the master bedroom with a large clothing closet. The spare bedroom actually only has a door width sized closet, or something that you would call like a hallway sized closet. Because of the way the house is designed and how the main hallway was designed in a capital letter L, I wasn't going to be able to fit my large blue desk into the spare bedroom, the one with the small closet. On a selfish note, because I wasn't willing to get rid of my blue desk, the master bedroom became the craft room. Also, I can't say that a large closet to store all of my collection, I mean hoard, of craft supplies wasn't an appealing proposition. But whether you just have a few shelves in a hallway closet, a small corner of your dining room, an attic, or if you're fortunate enough to have your own she shed in your backyard, I just can't get motivated to sew if every available surface in my craft room is cluttered with junk. So the big question for me is, how can I muster enough motivation for me to be productive? Part of the equation is just simply stepping over the threshold, even if it's only for a few minutes. Believe it or not, even just a few minutes can accomplish a lot. The second part is keeping on top of myself with discipline. Having the discipline to tidy up after myself as I go, or at the very least, after I've finished a project. If I'm feeling low on energy to dive straight into a complicated project, then simply tidying up is still being productive, but at least stepping over the threshold is a step in the right direction. 10 steps to prep before you sew. A simple sketch. It's a good idea to sketch out your design. It doesn't matter if you can draw or not. Nobody has to see your preliminary drawing, but at least get your idea down on paper. It's good to have a visual representation of what your end goal is, even if it were to change at some point along the journey. The paper pattern. If using a paper pattern, I'll go ahead and purchase all the notions for the project, and I'll collect all the notions in a bin or a basket until I'm ready to start the project. But when it comes to purchasing fabric for your project, it's best to buy a little bit more than what it suggests on the back of the commercial pattern, especially if you are going rogue and using a self-drafted pattern. There can also be unforeseen mistakes made along the way. Mistakes such as you may need to recut something, and purchasing extra fabric can save your butt, especially if you get into a pickle where you think you might run out. And I know what you may be thinking. Why not just go back to the store and buy more? Well, there's a few problems with that. First of all, we hoarders like to hoard, and that's what we do. The best case scenario is if you've recently purchased the fabric within the last couple of days or weeks. But if you purchased the fabric years ago, possibly when you were in a different state or country, and if that fabric shop is now out of business, you won't be able to get any more of it. Another reason is dye baths. If several months have passed since you originally purchased that fabric and want to repurchase it, hoping that it will match perfectly, there's a chance that the original fabric was bought from a different dye bath, even if it's from the same company or shop. So what do? You hoard. That's what you do, you hoard. Okay, no, I'm kidding. Just look at the back of the envelope where it suggests the yardage suggested for the project, and that's where you add. As a safety precaution, I usually order 1 to 2 yards more than I am predicting I will need. I can always make an accessory for the project with the extra fabric, or I will squirrel it away into my fabric pile, where I know I will use it someday without purchasing more fabric because I don't have the heart to get rid of it. You hoard, trace, or cut your paper pattern. You can decide whether you're on team trace or team cut. I, for one, am on team cut. And when my husband and I are spending quality time together, maybe we're having a stay-in date night and I don't feel like being just a bump on the couch, then I still like to maintain being productive. Okay, there is a critter in the small of my back, but that's okay. When my husband and I have a stay-in date night and I don't feel like being unproductive, then I'll cut paper patterns, edit video, work on some hand sewing without feeling like I'm sacrificing quality time with my husband. The mock-up. The mock-up is one of my least favorite steps of all. I can't even tell you how much I dread doing them. But I know if I don't, I have ruined many an expensive fabric by not doing a mock-up beforehand. So this is an essential step that should not be skipped. You'll never understand the struggle until it happens to you. I think the reason why I don't like them is I typically view them as a large hurdle to overcome before I even get to the sewing part, especially if it takes multiple mock-ups to get it right. Perhaps I should look at them in a different light. Perhaps I should view them as a tool that is helping me rather than hindering me. Wash your fabrics. I am on the wash your fabrics no matter what team. And before y'all roast me, and I don't mean silks or taffetas, which can change the hand or the feel of the fabric. Typically I deal with natural fibers, and most commonly cotton. I won't get into how damaging cotton production is on the environment, but when it's produced in a factory, it's treated with dyes, chemicals, pesticides, before being wrapped onto bolts, then packaged and shipped to distributors. My skin isn't overly sensitive, nor can I say I have very many allergies. But if you do, then I would think twice about not pre-washing your fabric. It's not necessarily my intention to be all doom and gloom about germs, but if I didn't take the time to pre-wash my fabric, I'm taking a great risk of producing a fabulous garment with a high probability of it shrinking to the point that my client or I could not even wear it. You probably just shrugged at this information, and that's okay. Personally, I would prefer to be safe rather than sorry, but until it happens to you, you will never understand. Ironing. Ironing your freshly washed fabrics is important. Cutting your pattern from deeply creased fabrics can and will skew your fabric pieces, with the high probability of the seams not matching up correctly, and just all around causing more headaches than necessary. Trust me, just iron it. Pin to fabric. When pinning your pattern to your fabric, it's important to pin it correctly. Yes, grain lines are important. The grain line is essentially the weave of the fabric, which direction the threads are running. It's important to understand that the way you cut out your fabric will affect or change the finished garment. There are 3 grain lines. The straight grain or lengthwise grain are the threads going parallel to the selvage edge. The selvage edge is the bound, uncut factory edge that doesn't unravel. Cross grain. The cross grain is the direction that someone cuts the fabric at a shop. The cross grain threads are running the width of the fabric, from selvage to selvage, or perpendicular to the straight grain. The bias is at a 45-degree angle between the straight and the cross grains. When the grain is at a 45-degree angle from the warp and the weft thread, it's referred to as the true bias. Every piece of woven fabric has 2 biases, perpendicular to each other. Cutting the fabric. Cutting the fabric is relatively straightforward. The only things you need to look out for are the pattern markings. Pattern markings are the symbols printed on the paper pattern. These symbols usually mean the same thing across all commercial patterns, but can be entirely different symbols or mean something entirely different in patterns produced by independent pattern makers. Notches can be found on the very edge of the paper pattern. It's important to consistently cut these out. These markings ensure that when you pin and sew the pattern together, the pieces line up properly. There are also markings that indicate which way you should put the paper pattern on the fabric. A double-ended arrow indicating the fabric's grain line. This arrow indicates whether or not it should be placed on a fold. Sometimes the instructions will indicate that you need to gather between these 2 dots. After you've cut the fabric, if there are any important markings on the paper pattern, you'll want to transfer them in chalk to your fabric. I'd use caution when using ink pens or Sharpies to transfer pattern marking, because the inks can bleed through your fabrics and ruin it. Ask me how I know. Pinning. Okay, so this is the last step before you sew. I usually start assembling my garments, starting with the darts, working in an assembly line fashion. And now you sew. I know this seems like a long list of things to accomplish, even before you get the fabric underneath the sewing machine. There's nothing that says you have to bulldoze your way through all these steps in a single day. Accomplishing 2 or 3 of these steps can have you well on your way to a completed garment. If you feel like sticking around or just want to know what other adventures I get up to, then please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. That is a really loud cricket. A little bit of acupuncture never hurt anybody, I guess. Let's just look at Heepos being all cute over there. Being all cute and sophisticated over there. Sophisticated. Just crack myself up. Or which directions? Kitty, leave that bread alone. Kitty, that's my bread. Oh gosh. Do you want to be in this video? Huh? Kitty. You want to be in this video? You look so cute today. I just felt like being cute today. Okay.